Hello, citizens of YouTube land.
Hey.
It's your president and your VP. And hey, guys, the month of Halloween horror is over. And so that means that it's now time for the Last Man on Earth trilogy remake, beginning with The Last Man on Earth,
Go figure.
which premiered May 6th, 1964. And it is a co-production of Americans and Italians. And the reason for this being is that the movie was shot in Italy to save money. And unfortunately, guys, I don't exactly have the budget or the box office at this time because I could not find it. But
But I wonder if MGM has that secured somewhere.
possibly. The movie is in public domain. So that means that hopefully we shouldn't get claimed for this. However, MGM does own the copyright, so maybe it's not in public domain no more. However, guys.
Well, they own the company that made the film go into public domain.
Yeah. So the movie is based off of a novel called I Am Legend, and that was written by
Richard Matheson,
and he has specifically stated that the 1964 version of the films that we're covering in the next 3 weeks is the one that is most faithful to his book.
Yeah,
However, he did say also that as much as he enjoys Vincent Price, who, by the way, is the star of the movie, that he didn't feel like he was truly suited for it.
Yeah, he actually wanted Harrison Ford to be the main,
which would have been a very young Harrison Ford and very inexperienced at the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, guys, let's kind of get right on into this one. And first and foremost, that the movie is driven by Vincent Price himself. It's pretty much entirely just him.
Yeah.
And it's driven by his actions and his emotions, along with voiceovers that give us what he's truly thinking. And at the beginning, he's making a wooden stake, and he's gassing up his car, and he's making preparations because it's been 4 years since a bacterial plague had wiped out the human population.
Yeah. So the film takes place in the year 1968, or it could be longer because it stops at a certain date on his calendar in the opening shot. I don't know if you noticed that or not.
Mm-hmm.
So it could actually be longer, but I think they're alluding that it's supposed to be the year 1968, which would be 4 years after the events of after the beginning events, which takes place in the year 1964, the year the movie was released in.
Now, there are 2 different versions that we found of this movie, too. One is the black and white version that we watched, and there's also a color version. They are both available on Tubi.
I highly suggest you watch the black and white version, but I know a lot of people get turned off by black and white. So there's also the color version available. But like I said, I highly suggest that you watch the film as it's originally intended to be, which is the black and white version.
So, like I said, guys, he's going through his day. We've got some voiceovers where he's telling us what's happening and what has happened, and he has to go through and he has to stake, which because his main enemies in this movie are vampires, and he doesn't exactly discriminate between a vampire and somebody who might have been a vampire but is no longer a vampire, and that's very important.
Yes, that becomes very important later. So we get so like I said, he doesn't care if they're alive. If they're alive and they may be a vampire, he's just like,
yeah. And because it's 1964, they had the Hays Code at the time, so they had to use some very cool techniques, which we'll show you a little bit of it.
They had to get very creative with how they killed the vampires, because it would cut to the shot of the person, and it'll cut to him basically staking them, and it'll cut to the person back to them basically being dead but with no stake, because they couldn't show that. Fortunately enough, 2 years after this movie got released, then the Hays Code was basically just
which, because it is 1964, there is a very there's a lack of blood, guys, in the film. And
again, that's because of the Hays Code.
In this version, they move like the vampires move kind of like lumbering zombies, which directly inspired George A. Romero to make Night of the Living Dead.
And it was because of this. It was because of this film and also the book.
Yeah.
So you can basically say that without I Am Legend, you wouldn't get any of the zombie media we have today.
You mean The Last Man on Earth and I Am Legend?
Yeah, the book and The Last Man on Earth. You wouldn't get any of the zombie media we have today.
So he's went through his day, and so it's night now, and the vampires come, and they're beating on his house, and they're just making a general nuisance of everything. He's not afraid of them.
He's basically just like, not this again, because one of them breaks his window, so he throws a glass bottle at him, being like, "Get out of here!"
And he sits down. And guys, fair warning for parents who might not want their children to watch something like this. There is the fact that Vincent Price is pretty much smoking cigarettes nonstop.
Yeah. Because basically he starts remembering memories that come to him of basically what's happening. Mm-hmm. So a bacterial plague.
There's a flashback, and it shows that he's a scientist, and the plague is happening, and him and his science buddy are trying to find an answer to the cure, which is also very important because there's one main vampire that keeps saying stuff like, "We've come to kill you, Robert. Come on out, Morgan. We've come to kill you."
Yeah. And it turns out that vampire is actually his science buddy that he was working with.
Yeah. And since all this has happened, guys, we get the effects of the plague have happened. His daughter comes down with the plague.
Mm-hmm.
And the military personnel, they burst in, and she is sent. Well, his wife makes the mistake of calling a doctor, which led the authorities to him. And they take the daughter away, and she's killed. And they're going to throw her in this fire pit. And this is pretty important. We should show this.
Right. Get out! I want my daughter. Mister, a lot of daughters are in there, including my own.
Right here. They have her in the pit, and he is arguing with the MP, the military police, and he says, "My daughter's there," and the military policeman says, "Well, my daughter's in there too. A whole bunch of people's daughters are in there." Mm-hmm. So he returns home. And one of the biggest signs right away, guys, of this plague, blindness. He gets home.
Well, actually, it starts out as, typical bacterial infection. Like
a common cold almost.
A typical bacterial infection. But as it worsens, it starts taking away your eyesight.
So he gets home. And his wife cries out to him, "I can't see."
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to her. And he turns her over. And he notices that it's already too late. But rather than turn her over to the MPs, he buries her. Which is actually a big mistake. Because that night, she comes
something
back.
something is knocking on his door. And honestly, I gotta say, this shot, this reveal that they do, it's actually right here. It's actually kind of scary for 1964, like for the standards in 1964. It was kind of scary.
Yeah. So with that, it dissolves. They do this little dissolving effect, and that was him remembering all the events that had led up to it. So he has been busy the whole time, staking vampires left and right, without uh, knowledge of if they really are one or not.
Yeah.
And so there's this puppy dog. Yeah, I know, guys. Puppy dog shows up. He follows the dog. The dog ran away and it come back. And he follows the dog though. And there's this woman coming towards him.
Well, actually, no. The dog winds up it winds up bleeding, and then he has to put the dog down because it turns out the dog got infected. So he's burying the dog, and then there's this woman he sees
Yep.
that's coming towards him, and he has to like run over to her and everything. She's terrified of him at first, and it turns out it's because she's like part of the society that
are the best way I can explain this is they have the vampirism, but not the urge to commit vampiric acts because they have some kind of device or something that keeps them from being vampires again.
So it's actually like this,
but they still have an
shot.
aversion to mirrors and to garlic.
And also sunlight. They have to keep themselves. Yeah. They basically have the vampirism, but they don't want to have the bloodlust.
So she was sent to spy on him and to hold him there. This is after, mind you, that he's basically cured her because, as it turns out, since he's immune, his blood is the key, and he could have saved all of the vampire people that weren't quite full on bloodlust vampires. As they're killing the bloodlust vampires, even the society here is killing the bloodlust vampires left and right.
Yeah, like he was.
And it wasn't the woman that did the iron staking, it was the society.
Yeah.
And so they show up and they're staking the vampires left and right too. Vincent Price, Robert Morgan in this version, known as Robert Neville, and the other two movies that we're going to cover. He runs away as he's shooting at them and whatnot, and they corner him, and he's in the church, and it's the final little spot, and they throw a spear, and it goes, right in the gut.
And
basically.
He says, "They fear me. All I wanted to do was help them, and yet they were afraid of me." And he dies.
The end. Now, guys, this movie touches upon a lot of different topics and themes that aren't even necessarily done that well today. Let's just say that. I mean, there are movies that do these kind of themes, but they're not done quite as well, really.
The themes that this movie tackles is how the hero eventually becomes the villain with the form of Robert Neville, Robert Neville.
How people fear what they don't understand.
How people fear what they don't understand.
Loneliness.
Yeah, the theme of loneliness and the theme of mental health and how the loneliness can ultimately affect it. And just a whole bunch of complex themes that they do really perfectly.
And it's all driven by Vincent Price. And for those of you out there, you know that Vincent Price tended to be somewhat over the top when it came to a lot of his performances. And everybody kind of knows the Vincent Price voice. And you've heard it parodied and all of that. But he really shows his acting chops in this movie.
Yeah, it's more of a grounded Vincent Price film. And you don't really get that often.
Yeah, for me personally, they picked the perfect actor at the time to do it, and I'm really glad that he did the movie. And for those of you who are wondering, I do know this. Currently, it has an 81% on Rotten Tomatoes
It is actually the highest rated films of the three
of the
that we're
three.
going to be covering.
Which, ironically, the second one that we're going to cover is the least rated one.
Honestly, I think I Am Legend should be the least rated one.
So, guys, final rating 5 out of 5. What say you?
Also a 5 out of 5. What can I say? It's The Last Man on Earth. It is a classic. It took the novel I Am Legend and turned it into a film really accurately. I loved it.
And for the budget that they had, they were able to tell a compelling story, and like we said, it's driven by Vincent Price.
Yeah.
But of course, as always, if you've seen The Last Man on Earth and you think that it is the worst post-apocalyptic horror film of all time, then clearly you have not seen
I Am Legend.
I Am Legend, which we'll get to. It's pretty good in its own right, I Am Legend, but for us, we feel that it's actually the weakest of the three.
Yeah.
So with that having been said, guys, stay tuned next time where, of course, it's going to be the 1971 remake of this film and the second adaptation of I Am Legend, entitled The Omega Man.
It actually gets confusing because it's like there's the book I Am Legend and then there's the Will Smith movie I Am Legend, so just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah. And yeah. So but there is one thing that I would like to point out, and that is that the movie does kind of the Last Man on Earth does kind of say the title of the movie at the very end, where he says, "I'm a man, the last man."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, guys, we'll see you guys next time where it will be that. And then after that, it's going to be I Am Legend. And then after we get through this trilogy here, it's into the Back to the Future trilogy. And then into December, where it's the 12 days of Christmas.
On the gaming channel for Back to the Future, I'll be doing Back to the Future, the game from Telltale. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, you're going to want to finish up the Quarry.
Yeah, I know.
Anyways, guys, that's all the time we have for. I guess there's only one thing left to say, and that is peace and love from Denny and Son. Bye.